Hello, good people. Hello, my friends. The doctor's in the house. My name is Dr. G. I also go as Dr. Mark Gomez, and welcome to the first episode of To Your Health with Dr. G. This show is going to be great. Today is a culmination of months of preparation, but really a lifetime of journeys and experiences. We're going to have a great time today, and I've got some fantastic guests. But before we get into that, let me tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm a board certified internal medicine physician. I practice in the Chicagoland area, and I'm just having a great time. This is going to be exciting. When people kind of describe me, they describe me kind of four ways. Number one, I'm a husband. Number two, father. Number three, a medical doctor. I like to go by those first things: husband, father, medical doctor. And then, of course, world citizen. So I'm just excited to be here today, and I want to thank Intellectual Radio for the opportunity to host my own show. This is going to be the first of many shows, guys, and I'm excited to have listeners to want to be empowered and feel great about their health and really to control their health destiny. So today, before I introduce my guests, I want to do a couple other things real quick. Number one, I want to just read a quick statement. The content of To Your Health with Dr. G is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and that the content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, and or treatment. Further details can be found at www.toyourhealthwithdrg.com/disclaimer. Now, again, my name is Dr. Mark Gomez. You can call me Dr. G. Follow me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, and follow me on Instagram. And the handle is To Your Health, Dr. G. You can also visit me on the internet. Website is www.drmarkgomez.com. So again, thanks for coming out today. We're going to have so much fun. We're going to talk today about ultra longevity for the busy professional. And I know this applies to many of our listeners. It applies to my panel today. It applies to me in my day-to-day living as a husband, as a father, as a medical doctor. And we're going to talk about things that make longevity work. We're also going to talk about things that that take away from our longevity. At the end of the day, when we talk about longevity, we talk about wanting to live a long time. And by definition, longevity is also used similarly with life expectancy. And that's really defined as the average amount of years left remaining in somebody's life at any particular age. So today we're going to talk about you busy people out there, and we're going to talk about how we can best design longevity in our day-to-day lives. A couple other quick notes. I want to just thank my marketer, Kim from Big Shot Marketing. Kim is an amazing person. She's really bought into our vision to have this show. She is in beast mode all the time. So we're very much grateful to Kim from Big Shot Marketing, #beast mode. I also want to thank my loving wife, Tiffany Gomez. Without her, I couldn't have done this show. She makes me a better father, a better husband, and certainly a better person every day. So without further ado, I want to take a few moments to introduce my panel. And today, I'm really excited to have these two gentlemen here today. I've known these guys for a long time. We've done many talks around the Chicagoland area, really trying to empower people to do really well with their health and their well-being. So immediately to my right, I've got Mr. Chad Earl. And let me tell you a quick story how I met Chad. I met Chad when I first joined the medical staff at the hospital that I'm at about 11 years ago. And I met him through a friend, a physician recruiter, as a matter of fact, who used to train with Chad. And the first time I met Chad, I tell you what, I thought I was in shape. And then I realized I met Chad and I said, man, I got to put some work in. Got to put some extra work in there, right, Chad?
Round is a shape, Doc.
So first time I met Chad, I said, all right, I'm going to work out with him. And I said, all right, Chad, I can do this. I can hang with you and everything. And next thing I know, after that workout was done, I was in the bathroom at Chad's office in his facility. I think I was in my drawers and he was holding my legs up. I almost passed out. So
it's a personal training for sure. No doubt about it.
So Chad is just a great guy. I've known for a long time and love him like a brother. And he and I have had many talks about wellness. So Chad, of course, is the owner of Integrated Wellness Online. He's also the owner of DuPage Fitness and Rehab, integratedwellnessonline.com. He's an excellent gentleman. So, Chad, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Thank you, Doctor. Basically, to make it short, I'm a personal trainer. And so when we think of personal training, you want to think of three particular categories. You typically secure personal training to improve your appearance, to improve your performance, or to manage your health and increase your vitality. So my specialty is actually the health restoration and vitality, the last component in those three. And my background is in nutrition and wellness with master's degrees in nutrition. And then I have certifications in different populations of exercise. But I just am glad to be here today because we want to make sure that we dispel some of the myths and we get to the heart of being healthy and being well and making sure that people can break the science down into components that they understand and can then implement it in their life.
Excellent. Thank you, Chad. The next guest today is Larry Love. I met Larry probably almost around the same time as I met Chad, because Chad actually introduced me to Larry, and Larry's just been he's just an excellent gentleman, just an excellent brother, and he just embodies performance, and that's what he's all about. And when we talk about longevity, performance is an important aspect of that. So I want to go ahead and introduce Mr. Larry Love. Larry Love is the owner of Total Body Wellness and Performance Incorporated. www.totalbodywellness.net. Larry, please tell us about yourself a little bit.
Thanks for having me on the show, Dr. G. Well, as a sports medicine specialist, it's been a great journey to optimize the movement of many athletes, but also just people in general. And so when we do that, we like to look at why people move the way they do. Do they have dysfunctional movements? Does that affect their performance? And at my practice, one of the evaluation techniques that is often used is really getting people to understand that movement has three phases. It has a correction phase, it has a progression phase, and then it has a performance phase. And with that performance phase, that really is what optimizes how people feel, how they perform, and lastly, how they achieve the goals that they desire. And that's what I do. It's sweet and simple.
Thank you, Larry. Now, each week with this show, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the show, but each week I'm going to be interviewing various guests and various experts in their medical and healthcare fields. And since I've known these two guys for a long time, and I've got personal stories that I won't say on the radio.
Share.
That's maybe for later. But since I know these guys for a long time, I knew I had to get these two on when I was going to go to my show. I want to do a quick shout out to the Loyola Ramblers. I graduated from medical school from Loyola, and we just fell a little bit short there in that national semifinal game to Michigan, but really proud of Loyola. So go Ramblers. All right. So today what we're going to do, and really how I'd like to break down the show is I like to break it down a little bit in medical terms. And then, of course, with my guests here, they'll talk about various approaches to health from their disciplines. In medicine, when somebody comes in and sees us, we always call it the chief complaint. And that is the reason why somebody sees their medical professional. So how I like to start this show is I like to start out by talking about the chief complaint, aka the question or situation of this hour. And our topic is longevity, and certainly ultra longevity. How do you attain that for the busy professional? So our question is, how do we make longevity work in our busy lives? I think about it for myself, certainly being a physician, being a husband, being a parent to two little kids, and being a world citizen. It's hard to make that work. But what we want to do today is outline how can we properly design your health and wellness. Step one, from a medical perspective, I always say you gotta get a physical. If you haven't had a physical in the last year, number one, you're due for a physical. Number two, you should make that happen and go see your primary care doctor, because your primary care doctor is going to be the person that rescues you if you get into trouble. So if you haven't had a physical, you got to get a physical. And by getting a physical doesn't mean just going to see the doctor. It also means getting some baseline labs. And those labs are important because it gives us objective data to see how you're doing. When we think about health and medicine, it's very objective. Yes, there's very subjective things that people complain with, but the standard is you measure on objective information. So whether you're doing lab tests or whether you're doing imaging tests, it's all objective. Either you're objectively well or you're objectively sick. And so it's super important to go ahead and see your doctor. So again, if you haven't seen your doctor in the last year, go see a doctor, get your foundation, because you can't really start living unless you know that you're not dying. So when I talked to Chad, it was about 2 months ago, Chad and I met. I was telling you earlier that Chad and I meet every now and then just to talk stuff. And I bring things from a medical standpoint. Chad brings things from a nutritional performance, wellness design standpoint. And so every now and then we sit there, we talk about different ideas. So about 2 months ago, I was sitting there in Chad's office, and it was a Sunday. It was like Sunday morning or after church. And Chad and I are just shooting the stuff. And we're just talking about, well, we're busy, and Chad is a parent, and Larry's also a parent as well too, and we're all about the same age, and we're saying, all right, here we are on a Sunday, and we start thinking, how do we practice what we preach? How do us as busy professionals help other professionals out there to achieve their life goals? And so Chad and I were talking, and I'll let Chad tell the story a little bit, but we started talking, and we started writing some things down. And when I wrote things down, I really had this epiphany. And I said, wow, I only have 40 minutes a day on average to dedicate to my marriage, or 40 minutes a day on average to dedicate to parenting, or 40 minutes a day on average to dedicate to health. And so Chad has coined this term, the 25-year weekend. And so what I want to do is I want Chad to explain that, because this is just an eye-opening experience. And I went home after I met with Chad, and I told my wife Tiffany, I said, wow, I said, honey, guess what? I really only have 40 minutes a day. And I felt really bad about that. I thought, how'd that go, Doc? That was not good at all. And I wound up telling a couple of patients this story just on the side. And they were like, Dr. G, how could you say that to your wife? Right. How could you say that to your kids?
Mine's 24 minutes. So,
and I go, but we have obligations. We have obligations that we have to do, and we have to figure out how to design around those obligations. Right. Because the bottom line is, once you wake up in the morning, that time when you wake up in the morning is your time. The rest of the time is on somebody else's dime, somebody else's dollar. So Chad, I want you to go ahead and break down this concept, because I thought this was just amazing when you're talking about health and wellness design and longevity.
Yeah, and so as Dr. Gomez pointed out, me and Dr. Gomez were talking, and how it kind of works is me and Dr. Gomez talk, and then me and Larry talk, and then Larry and Gomez talks. So that's kind of how the situation kind of flows usually. It's so
three-way
it's kind of a three-way.
Yeah,
we all kind of talk independently, but together. So with this particular conversation, we were discussing how a lot of the recommendations on health are for people who are totally infatuated with just improving that dimension. When you look at some of the traditional information, they say, hey, exercise for an hour a day. And at first it seems very benign to say, yeah, hey, I'll put an hour in. And then you realize, well, if I sleep 8 hours and I work 8 hours, not counting the commute and the follow-up, and so now I'm working 10, 11 hours, that already is 17, 18 hours. Okay, which is now leaving you 6 hours where you have to eat, you have to go to the bathroom, you have to prep, so you have to clean up behind your eating. So now you're down to 4 hours. And so then with that 4 hours, you might have to spend time with the kids. You might spend time with the wife. You might have to do some personal development. You might try to exercise. You might have to do routine errands. And so what you realize is that you have a finite time frame to do the behaviors that can promote the longevity that you want. And when we get into the longevity, you'll quickly find that relationships are paramount to living a long time. Because if you're going to be alive, You want to have fun with people who care about you, who you've invested in. And so that's what makes life living. And so those are your parents, your spouse, your kids, your friends. And so if you spend time achieving and never invest in anybody else outside of yourself, you're very lonely. And being alive and being lonely, the two don't go together. And so you need to understand then how you can invest the day. And so you have to work, you have to get paid, but yet you want to be married, you want to have kids, you want to have friends. And so this typically breaks down to very tight segments. And we look at the 20, I've coined that term kind of 25-hour, the 25-year weekend, because your work life is dedicated to just that. You're trying to squeeze in your weekend for recreation and relationship building and catching up. And when you retire from your work life, you want to be able to live in the weekend. You see, so you convert your weekend design to your weekday. And so you're kind of parsing out on the weekends while you're working the lifestyle that you're actually saving and living for.
I think that's an excellent, excuse me, I think that's just an excellent way to look at it. And what we've actually done is we've actually challenged people, and I certainly challenge patients in my practice, to write out a grid. I mean, I tell them the same story that I've shared with you all. Start out, get a piece of paper, write out your obligations. Write out how much time you sleep, how much time you need to work. And again, as Chad said, you might have only 4 hours in any given 24-hour cycle, Monday through Friday. We're not counting the weekend, but you might have 4 hours a day on average to do the things that we're asking you to do from a health perspective, to exercise, to eat right, to have recreation, to have relationships, because the rest of the time you're at work, you're commuting, you're sleeping. So you have to try to design your life around that time frame. And the people that design their lives the best are the people that live the longest.
There you go.
When we think about longevity, I know one of the things that's important to me from a medical standpoint, I want to get Larry's opinion in a second, but from a medical standpoint, in addition to going to your doctor, which again is still the number one foundation, you've got to go see your primary care doctor. And it's interesting. I've been telling some of my colleagues, I'm going to try to elevate the role of the primary care doctor. The primary care doctor is so important in your life, in your foundation. So from a medical standpoint, we look at things like risk factors. How do you modify risk? Things that are modifiable, like, for example, don't smoke cigarettes. For example, limit your alcohol consumption. For example, don't hang out in the sun all day long. For example, maintain a healthy weight. These are things that we can modify. And if somebody does have a disease like diabetes or pre-diabetes or hypertension, we can modify that through treatment. Things that aren't modifiable in a medical standpoint, things like your age. As much as many of us want to be younger, I guess when we get older, we can't change that. You can't change your sex. You're male or female. You can't change your ethnicity or your race. So you can't change certain things, and you can't change your family history. What's happened in the family has happened. So we want people to focus on the things that they do have some sense of control over, and going from there. So I want to ask Larry. Once again, Larry is the performance expert, and he works with a lot of clients on getting them to perform better, not just from a athletic training standpoint. He really gets into the mindset of getting people to know that they can achieve their goals. So Larry, let me ask you this. When you think about designing a 25-year weekend, what are some important things for you when you're working with your clients that they can spread to the audience here on how to best achieve things?
Dr. G, that's such an important question, because most people think once they see their physician, that's where it stops. And so when we look at what we call a prevention to performance continuum, it's what you do after you see the physician as well. So when people come and see me, or when they see Chad, one of the things that we must impart upon them is you have to keep going. And so it's just not enough to see the physician. What's your physical standpoint? Are we addressing your health, your wellness, your fitness? So then we can lead to better performance. After we address those 4 pillars, now we have a great program that's set up for them. And also, it's not just about how you look, it's how you feel. And once we address how they feel, then it leads to better performance. And so once we kind of mix all those pillars and parameters together, it really makes for a great recipe. And last, I would just say that performance for a lot of people and a lot of the information out there has always been based on physical needs, but the whole intrinsic needs and the motivation behind that is really what drives performance, because how you look and how you feel, again, leads to better performance.
I want to say, it's interesting to piggyback on what Larry said. Again, starting out, any kind of longevity plan starts out with getting a medical exam, and getting a medical exam, and then getting if you go see your doctor, and then you wait 9 months to get your labs done, that's probably not a good indication of how you're doing, because your body is physiologically different 9 months from now. So when we talk about that it is today. So we talk about a lot. It's got to be done in the present time. And one of the things that we always talk about is you've got to live in that moment. And the past is in the past. We can't change that. The future has yet to come, but we can try to plan for it. But the future is not necessarily guaranteed. So all we have is our present life at this moment. One of the things that we talk about, and I was some of my new viewers, I was actually on here a few weeks ago on my good friend Dana show, Dana being Dana, and I hit him with some stats. I was there to talk on their cancer show, and so people that know me really well, they know I'm a stats guy. So I got some numbers to hit people with, because why not? But sometimes numbers help us understand the impact of things that we're talking about, conditions that we're dealing with. And so a lot of this is known information, but a lot of it may not necessarily be known. So, for example, a lot of people think that we in the United States have the best health outcomes. Would you guys say that's true or false?
Right.
I would say certainly it's false. Well, I tell you what, in relation to the show being about longevity, the USA does not, contrary to popular belief, have the longest amount of living.
Was that 36, something like
that? It's not good, but yet we spend the most amount of money per capita in this country on health care. We spend money on going to see our physician. We spend money going to the gym. We spend money on billions of dollars a year on supplements. We spend a lot of money for a lot of different things, but yet we don't have the best outcomes. We don't live the longest. You want to comment on that, Chad?
Yeah, let me add a segment to that. Again, when you look at those numbers, it is true that the United States is somewhat down on that list.
We're not at the bottom.
No, but here's even the greater travesty of that is not only are we losing some years, and let's say it's 3-4 years from the peak, our life expectancy, but the chronic disease burden. These other countries are living several years longer, 3 to 5 years longer, and they do not have the chronic disease. And so they're having a better expression of life. See, that is really the crux of longevity. If I told you you can be 100 years old, but you have to sit in a chair for the last 30 years, not be able to eat the food you want, not have any sex, what's the point of being alive? I don't want to be alive if I can't do what I want to do. I mean, what good is that? And so longevity is tied to both duration and expression. I don't want just my name to be on the back of the jersey and you have to guess what I used to do. I want you to be able to see my expression of who I am. And so that's when we look at the second half of the show, getting into those aspects, because everybody knows about visiting your grandparents in the old folks' home, and they're nowhere near the people your parents tell them they are. You're saying, what are you talking about? That grandma, what are you doing? Oh, your grandpa back in the day. I'm like, what are you talking about? But you want to have the vitality of being able to do a lot of the activities that people talk about. And so that, to me, Dr. Gomez, is the crux of, as Larry was saying about performance. Yes, the medical doctor keeps you alive. Yes, the medical doctor understands and manages your disease, but there is an entire continuum of prevention to performance. After you're alive, after you're stable, what about thriving? What about that? And so that's what we want to really have you understand today, is get into that aspect of living as well.
I think one of the things that you just said about thriving, a lot of times we don't necessarily think about that. I mean, we go through lives and you wake up at a certain time every day, you go to work, you might get beat up at work, you long days, you get home, you gotta hang out with the kids, gotta do homework. And then the whole cycle repeats itself the next day. So people can get stuck in this trance of just this mundane assembly line kind of approach on a day-to-day basis.
Correct.
That you lose the aspects of why you're here in the first place. I mean, we're here, the first part of our lives. Yeah, we're it's education. The first third of our lives, we'll say. Second third, yeah, it's all about getting married or having a life and career and family. And then you want to get that return on that investment in your retirement years. Nobody wants to check out early, but if you've got serious disease burden, by the time that you're older, it's going to be hard for you to finally live and express things. So I promised a little bit of stats, but here's the USA stats. This was published in 2015. The source is the World Bank Group. USA average life expectancy 79 years in the year 2015. In 1960, USA was at 70 years. So we gained 9 years in roughly in a roughly 55 years. The world average right now, at least published in 2015, average longevity is 72 years. So the USA does beat the world by average. In 1960, the world life expectancy longevity was 53. But when you look at different regions, it's, as Chad said earlier, we're not even the best in our own in North America. Canada actually outlives us by a couple of years. Mexico is a little bit behind us. But North America still as a whole does well compared to the rest of the world. But there certainly are inadequacies and inherent inequities in world health. For example, we know that people, if you have a higher income, you tend to live longer. Right. If you have a lower income, you tend to not live as long. If you live in an environment that is under constant stress, a country that has a lot of internal conflict, your longevity is compromised. Right. We talk about that. We call it an allostatic load, your ability to respond to certain situations that can affect your overall survival. And when you look at countries that that have the longevity, they don't necessarily, they're not necessarily super rich, but the people have the relationships. And so those countries, we call those, well, it was coined in 2005 by a guy named Dan Bettner, who first coined the term in National Geographic magazine. He called them blue zones. And he identified, him and some of the researchers, they identified 5 places, 5 regions in the world that have people living the longest and living the healthiest. So when you are old, you're not in a wheelchair. When you're 90, you're still walking down the streets. And so those countries, Sardinia, Italy, but Sardinia. Number 2, Okinawa, Japan. I'm thinking about trying to move there right now, fellas. As you got to be in that environment. You can't just leave Illinois right now and go to Italy and just live there and expect to live to 90 years old.
You might stand out
if
you were to go there right away. I'm just saying.
So we've got Sardinia, Italy. We've got Okinawa, Japan. We've got Nicoya in Costa Rica. We have Icaria in Greece, and we have Loma Linda, California. USA didn't make it as a hotspot for longevity. Loma Linda, California, but in a specific population of Seventh-day Adventists. Actually, a number of years ago, the same researcher, Dan Bettner, he actually filed a project based off of Finland where they tried to actually make a city. Try to have a city change its longevity. So he picked I thought it might have been Minnesota, but he picked a town and he talked about not necessarily changing individual behaviors, but he talked about having a community that supports that. And I don't remember the results off the top of my head, but and I'm going to kind of paraphrase it, was that after people adopted the community approach to longevity, people lived longer, 3 years on average. They may add 3 years to their life. They spent less money on healthcare. They reduced smoking. Why not? But they actually, as a community, improved. And when you're looking at things that bind these communities together, a couple of things. Number one, they have regular physical activity. They have life purpose that Chad was talking about. They have stress reduction. They have moderate calorie intake. They have a semi-vegetarianism kind of diet. They have moderate alcohol intake, especially wine. We were looking at the Mediterranean region, and we can talk about that all day long, about some of the benefits of those kind of diets. And then, of course, they engage in spirituality, religion, family life, and social life. So I'm gonna ask this question to Larry. So Larry, we're talking about longevity and trying to design it and understanding. First of all, we just talked about, hey, here's where we're at the USA. We are not at the top. I mean, we're up there, but there are many countries that outperform us. Even our neighbors up north outlive us in Canada. But how do you think we should best approach this? So, say I'm a busy person, you're a busy person. How do you design these things that you want to have longevity? We're talking about things that communities share in common: regular activity, life purpose, stress reduction, sense of community, sense of family, sense of relationships. How do we best do that in our busy lives?
And that is another great question, Dr. G. But when we talk about longevity, I think we must talk about the equation of performance potential. And so in those other parts of the world, their performance potential is all relegated on a willingness to live longer. And here in the United States, we have this mentality of more, working more, social activities and different things like that. But incorporating good health, good performance, good wellness around a busy schedule has to start with willingness first. Self-preservation is really key. After we go ahead and we carve out some time, sometimes it's about getting with the right professional. A lot of people try to do it on their own. There's many things out there on the internet that are mythical, but when you get with credentialed professionals to provide a service that you need, that really is going to help you stay accountable. And so I can't put enough emphasis on the accountability piece. Accountability with good professionals, and also someone to kind of remind you of how important you are versus everybody else in your support system. That goes a long way. And I always say, if you don't have a good support system, you will end up supporting a system. And that right there is stress. Make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a great kind of approach. I wish you can sometimes be in the room with me with my patients. That'd be great, because you can coach them up and get into some of that mentality aspect. But you're right, the willingness. Another thing that we talk about in medicine a lot is you may start a plan, but you have to have a follow-up for whatever condition you have. Even when I see patients that come in only see me once a year, that is their follow-up. But if somebody certainly has other disease burdens, they've got to follow up, because if you get off that pathway, you're only going to be putting yourself at risk for more medical complications to happen. Chad, from your perspective, how important is following up, on a wellness plan for you?
Yeah, great question, Dr. Gomez. And to speak on that, for my practice, as Larry's talking about, when you look at some of these terms and we say, I want to measure your health, your lab values, your physical dimensions. I want to see how fit you are, your physical capacity, your ability to take in the right nutrients, vitamins, minerals. Wellness, for me, is the actual measuring of the daily behavior. It's hard to say somebody is well. It's not a destination. It's more of a priority, as Larry was saying. You have to say to yourself, today, I'm going to do these things. And when I get done with the day, therefore I can say, boy, I lived well today. Health is what you measure. Fitness is what you measure, but wellness is what you are. You're in the moment with it. And without somebody keeping you accountable to that moment passes up. And you say, you know what, I'm going to skip lunch. You know what, I'm not going to weigh today. You know what, I'm not going to go by and see my friend. I'm not going to have that conversation. I'm too busy. I got things that I have to do. And that's always the case. And so when you look at the busy professional and you're trying to make your way, there's only one way that you're going to get ahead, and it's exchanging something that somebody else wants. And so if you don't have the money you want, or you don't have the body you want, or the physique you want, then you're exchanging the time and relationships in your life to get these things. That's the American conundrum, right? These other societies don't have to make that exchange because it's not available to them. They can't go out and get a brand new Mercedes if they work hard enough. They can't go out and get a big house. They can't go out and get designer clothes. They can't do that when they sacrifice and get the education and work the long hours. But in America, if you simply keep paying the cost, you'll get it. But you also will get chronic disease, shortened lifespan, loneliness, depression, and all of the other things that coincide with achievement, as it says. And so we have to be careful not to conflate achievement with happiness. And so to me, as Larry's talking about, the practitioner helps keep their client centered around the difference. Yeah, you may be making the money. Yeah, you may be climbing the corporate ladder. But how's the kids? How's the wife? How's your health? How's your stress level? Because it's not a balance. It simply is a shift. Some day I'm doing this, other days I'm doing that. It's never balanced. And so that to me becomes the interesting relationship between the client and their healthcare team.
Thanks. You want to say something, Larry?
Yeah, I was just going to add that many times when people are not putting their health first, it really comes down to what's not adding value to them, what they're adding value to. And so when you have a reciprocal exchange of adding value and also receiving value, that really allows you to put your health first. And so I just want to put that point in there.
Well, thank you very much. Interesting thing is, as Larry, Chad, and I have known each other for a long time, and we've collaborated on many efforts in the Chicagoland area. I'm reminded of the various engagements we've been out to, speaking engagements and everything. And one of the common underlying themes that we see when we go in and talk to people, and certainly talk to people in our community, it's different. Different communities have different disease burden. I mean, we all still get heart disease. Heart disease is still the number one top cause of death in this country. Cancer is number two. Communities still get it, but certain communities have a higher disparity. They get it worse than other communities. For example, African American men have the highest incidence of prostate cancer. African American men have the highest incidence of colorectal cancer. And so we look at certain communities. So when we go out and talk a lot, one of the common things that we see, going back to kind of what we said a little while ago, is that a lot of people have yet to see their doctor. And one of the things that we see a lot, certainly in our community, is that Black men don't necessarily go. And what I try to do is I try to encourage. It doesn't matter if you're Black, white, any race, you got to go. That's step one. And so we want to try to create a sense of urgency that actually seems to be lacking in certain communities. On the flip side, if you don't have that urgency, it's hard by the time you finally do get that urgency and disease has kicked in, then it's very hard to rescue you from that.
And that's a good point. As he talked about communities, and it's related to the African American community and the lack of action. Some of the other communities, if you look at, Caucasian, for example, people who do take control, who are used to doing some proactive services, it might be tough to partner and know when to shift and say, you know what, hey, this is a lot of information for me to try to take hold of, and then you get paralyzed by not acting, thinking that you're researching, thinking that you're trying to figure out what best to do. So it's not so much that, this community doesn't have a need for healthcare, but as Dr. Gomez pointed out, how they intersect becomes equally valuable. Yes, you do start with the physical, and as me and Larry and other practitioners that work on the healthcare team, how we intersect with different populations after the medical objective classification is very important. And so the value is there.
It's interesting. We're bombarded by health all the time. We're bombarded by the appearance of health. Let's put it that way: the appearance of health. So you look at our pop stars in pop culture. You look at athletes; they look healthy. The only difference between NBA player or NFL player and me is that they can execute a skill much better than I certainly can, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're healthier. But we have this perception of what health is, and that's it. But then when it comes down to ourselves, we sometimes forget to take care of ourselves. But you say, I was watching the Oscars and I see this person, they look great, they are healthy. Well, you don't necessarily know that they're healthy, they look good right there. But same thing. But look what happens after people are athletes and they get away from performing at that high level. What happens to their health? Well, they've got chronic pain. They've got they gain weight. They've got eventually high blood pressure, diabetes. Now, you didn't think about that, and people will say, "Oh my gosh, I remember watching that guy play 20 years ago. He was dunking on everybody, he was scoring all sorts of touchdowns." And you go, "He's got this? I thought he was healthy."
And that's a good point. And as Dr. Gomez pointed out, sometimes we conflate the activity with the outcome. And we forget that, athletes are a certain age. They're not 50-year-old out there dunking. Okay. So they're right. I mean, the greatest dunker, Julius Erving. Okay. You look at him now. Okay. Look at Michael Jordan now. Okay. Look at these people after they're retired and they age very similar to the population. It's just their peak hormonal expression is very, very different. But as their hormone pattern starts to digress and break down, now you have this interesting back to the mean when it looks at disease. Same for Hollywood. How old is the average Hollywood leading actor and actress? They're not 60 years old. Those females aren't 65. Okay, you're talking about somebody who's in their 20s. And so, we look at the stories, smoking, drinking. Okay, they're 20 years old. Okay, that athlete smoking, staying out, drinking, not eating right, still performing. They're 25. Okay, so don't necessarily think that the activities that somebody who you're admiring necessarily with their physique is what's creating the outcome. A lot of it is the resiliency of that genotype at the age, just like when you were younger, right? There's no 15-year-old trying to get washboard abs. They're 15 years old. That's what makes their abs, okay?
I had a membership at Bally's Fitness when I was 15.
You see any 15
I actually think I was trying to get washboard abs at that time.
You're the only one, Gomez.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting point that you say. You don't see, people return to the mean as they get older, and you don't see 50-year-olds out on the battlefield fighting for our country. You just can't do that. You cannot perform like that. You will get injured. You don't see a 50-year-old playing tackle football with a whole bunch of 25-year-olds. You will get injured. Simple. Larry, you want to say something about that?
I was just going to say it's all relative when it comes to health, wellness, fitness, and performance. And it's based on 3 parameters: efficiency, effectiveness, and engagement. And so a lot of times...
Can you say that again?
Yeah, it's all based on efficiency, effectiveness, and engagement. And so a lot of times when we see these athletes or high performers, we have to understand their efficiency of movement, their health patterns are specifically engaged for that actual activity. And so as we age, one of the things that changes, the expression that changes, is how efficiently we can do things, how effectively we can do things, and how we engage in it. So if my old self at 21, we're going to go out and play basketball versus my 45-year-old self, it's a different efficiency of movement. It's a different level of effectiveness in how I recover. And last, how I engage to keep doing what I need to do. So those are some of the 3 E's of health, wellness, and fitness that I want to lay out there.
Hey, Chad, how do you think Larry would do? The 45-year-old Larry versus the 21 Larry? Who would win in the game of one-on-one?
Well,
Brains versus brawn?
You definitely have to change your game. Know what you can do. I tell you that. And the 45-year-old will be talking a lot of smack. Versus a 20-year-old Larry, I tell you that right now. That is true, Dr. Gomez. Same for me. The 20-year-old Chad versus the 40-year-old Chad. Not quite the same. A lot of timeouts.
I'll tell you what. I turned 40 this year, and there's no doubt I cannot recover how I used to. Yeah, actually, if I went out, I think about 11 years ago when we first met, yeah, right, and I'm literally in my underwear in Chad's locker room, and him give me some Gatorade and trying to make sure he doesn't have to call 911 on me and passing out because I thought I could hang and I couldn't. It'd be tough right now, and that's 11 years ago. My body is different now than it was then. I'm physiologically different. My hormonal expression is different. Actually, 11 years ago, I didn't have any kids. I just started dating my wife at that time. And so you're in a different part of life. Your stress load is different. Everything's different about you at that time.
No doubt. And I think, as you wind down, people need to kind of understand this. Aging well is an unnatural process, right? Nature is not concerned with you being alive after you reproduce your kids. And so for you to remain vital, you have to create an artificial design that protects against your decay and breakdown. And so you have to eat things that are different. You have to sleep different, as Larry's saying. You have to recover with unique strategies. You have to take certain types of products. You have to avoid certain types of toxins and activities. These same activities when you were younger were restorative. You could play sports and with testosterone get stronger tissues and stronger ligaments and tendons. But as you get older, that same repeated stress creates wear and tear, breakdown, inflammation. And so not only do you have to look at what you're doing and how you engage it, but you have to create these unique artificial designs per decade to keep your physiology in a place that's optimum.
Thank you. So we got about 5 minutes left. So we're going to try to wrap this up. But before we get into some of the final thoughts, first of all, this has been an excellent conversation. But I want to leave it like this before we get some final words from my guests today. In medicine, I talked about in the beginning, when we have a problem in medicine, we call it when somebody presents to us, we call it the chief complaint. And then as a physician, after you've done your exam and everything and heard the story, we come with an assessment and plan. So as I kind of look at the assessment and plan section now, what we want to do is talk about in these last few minutes is the importance of taking action. So what I want to do is I actually want to start with Larry. And I want to say Larry, if you can give us a couple takeaway points, like what are some key take-home points that listeners can do when it comes to making longevity work in their lives?
First of all, I want to just state it begins with knowing that you're worth it. Your health is worth it. That's the first point with longevity. The second point is this right here. If you don't know, you need to find someone who does. And there are qualified professionals that will help you with longevity. The last piece is this right here. Follow-up is important, as you mentioned earlier. If something's not working, let's get it corrected. It makes no sense to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. You're not seeing results. So that's what I would leave with them.
Thank you. Chad, a couple quick final thoughts down the last few minutes.
Yes. I would say that you need to engage multiple healthcare providers. People have their unique perspectives and they manage different parts of your health. And so one qualified individual is great, but when you pair that one qualified individual with multiple qualified personnel, you now can get a comprehensive plan and cover all your bases. And so see your physician, See your complementary healthcare provider, be it a personal trainer, be it an athletic trainer or nutritionist. Have them work together to protect your short-term risk factors and account for progression in your health status.
Thank you. My final thoughts, and I'll leave it at this is the last word. Really, what we want to do today is my goal was to really kind of create this sense of urgency. You know, we're all busy in lives. You know, we've got careers or we've got families. Maybe we're older, we're retired, but we still have things to do. Your health has to be first and foremost. Without being healthy, you cannot live. It's hard to do certain things that you want to do if you don't have that foundation. So my kind of takeaway point is to, yes, see your doctor. If you haven't had a physical in over a year, I challenge you to go see your doctor. Get one. If you don't know a doctor, find one. Do some research, but invest in your health. That's the biggest take home point that I can say. So what I want to do is I want to just say thank you to my guests. We have Chad Earl, owner of Integrated Wellness Online, www.integratedwellnessonline.com.
Thanks for having me.
We've got Larry Love, owner of Total Body Wellness and Performance Incorporated, www.totalbodywellness.net. Stay tuned for next week's episode. When is enough enough? Balancing self-care and caregiving. Again, my name is Dr. G. You can follow me on www.drmarkgomez.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook @ToYourHealth, Dr. G. Thank you, guys. God bless. Bye-bye.